got a great show for you tonight. We're really proud to have Joseph Pinion on us, who is a chair of the Democratic Club, of the Progressive Democratic Club, and we'll be getting to him in just a couple minutes. Just want to talk for a moment or two about climate change and the hurricanes that Florida has just been experiencing. It seems it's kind of like karma. One might think it was like karma that the state that banned the words climate change from government laws and then went ahead and restructured Florida's energy policy so that climate change and addressing planet warming pollution are no longer our priorities. And instead, the priorities now are reducing reliance on foreign energy sources and get this one, strengthening the energy infrastructure against, as the measure says, natural and man-made threats. Now the state is being plummeted by a third climate change induced hurricane, and there's still a month and a half of hurricane season to go. Not to mention the fact that, insurance rates Florida now has, I believe, the highest insurance rates in the nation, if you can even get them. And they can't talk about climate change in government papers. It's just unbelievable. I got a very, very interesting thing came into on my Facebook post. I get a lot of religious, because I'm on this atheist group as well. The religious people like to flood us with things, but every now and then an atheist likes to make a little bit of fun of them. And one of them, posing as a Christian, wrote, "I'm a Christian and believe in angels and talking snakes, but I need to see more data on climate change." Right. Well, anyhow, that's, it's this climate change is really the existential threat of the century, and it's hardly even getting talked about. And yet, because Trump denies that there is climate change, he calls it a hoax, and he kind of makes light of it, saying that that's going to create a lot more beachfront property in Florida. So maybe his Mar-a-Lago, I don't know, is his Mar-a-Lago state on the beachfront area? Maybe he wants to get some beachfront property to Mar-a-Lago, but it really is the existential threat, and we've got to take it seriously. And, the young people out there, you're the ones that are going to be suffering from it. I'm not. I'll be dead before long, long before climate change is going to be causing me any problems. But you people who are in your teens or 20s or 30s, you're going to be around, and you're going to get to see the real brunt of it beginning around 2050, 2060. And it's not going to be pretty. And we're not doing anything about it. I mean, we try to do this and that, but the amount of work that what's being done is nowhere near what needs to be done. So we'll wait and see. But now for the guest of the show. I am so pleased and so proud that my guest tonight is Joseph Pinion. Joseph is a proud progressive Democrat and environmentalist from Carson, California. You'll have to look that up on the map if you want to know where Carson is, or maybe Joseph will tell us where it is. He double majored in politics and history at UC Santa Cruz. He has formerly served as a DNC, that's a Democratic National Committee delegate for Bernie Sanders, parliamentarian for Field the Burn Democratic Club, Los Angeles County, chairman of the Carson Environmental Commission, and vice chair of the Carson Planning Commission. He is currently on the e-board of Brownie Mary Democrats of California and is the president of the Progressive Democratic Club, the chairman of the Palos Verdes South Bay Sierra Club, and chairman of the Carson Alliance for Truth, among other active roles he plays on the local and state level. So, welcome to our show, Joseph. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
The first question I have for you after reading all this is, do you have time to sleep?
No, absolutely not. You invited me last week, and I had to decline because I had another event scheduled. So when you asked me to come down tonight, I had to double check my calendar to make sure I wasn't double booked. So I'm pretty much, between the election, I'm booked up almost every single day. I'd say about 12 weeks before the election. Every single day there's something I got to do, if not multiple things I have to do.
Well, we're all really getting involved. I'm going to be going to the Democrats, the National Democrats are chartering some buses to take people to Phoenix, Arizona to canvass. And so Victor and I are going to be going there, not this weekend, the following weekend for 3 days to knock on people's doors. And they're busing all kinds of people there because Arizona is a swing state. And it's one of those states that's going to make up the, who wins the election. Joseph, this whole thing is just bizarre. I can't understand how people put up with it, even Republicans. I mean, if you don't live in one of those 7 swing states, you are totally ignored in the presidential race. It's like your vote doesn't even matter. Your vote doesn't even count. And they're spending how many hundreds of millions of dollars in those 7 states, and the other states are not getting any of that money, and we don't get to see the candidates hardly, and this kind of stuff. We've got to do away with this electoral college system, and it's going to be impossible. I don't think it'll ever get done, but it's so unfair. Once again, if Trump does win, he's not going to get the majority of votes. That'll probably go to Harris, and just like back in 2016 when he did win, Clinton got the majority of votes, not Trump, but he still won because of the electoral college.
If I can speak a little bit about that, Lanny, because I think the electoral college system, which a lot of people don't like, is a symptom of a larger problem. And that is the way we allocate representation in the House of Representatives. So for those who don't know, the electoral college is each state is awarded 2 electors, because every state gets 2 senators, plus the amount of House of Representative members. So a state like Wyoming has 1 member plus 2 senators that get 3 votes. California has 52 members of Congress, I think, and then 2 senators, so they get 54 votes. When the Constitution was ratified, the largest state was, I think, Virginia, and the smallest state was Rhode Island. And at the time, the difference in population, I think, was about 14-1. And we look at it today, and the states have grown so much large in population. We look at California, population 40 million, and a state like Wyoming has a population of 500,000, and they get 3 electoral votes, and we only get 54. So if we were allocated more proportionally, what's called the Wyoming rule, which would be Wyoming gets 1 rep, and then every state gets a rep according to the small state, or in this case, Wyoming. If we do it that way, then actually California will be entitled to 80 members of Congress instead of 52.
Well, is that a solution that could be done even with the way the electoral college is set up by the Constitution now? Is that something that can be done?
It would require a constitutional amendment.
It would, okay.
But it would make the proportions a little bit more sense, because again, these smaller states, a state like Wyoming has a population of 500,000. That's approximately the population of city of Long Beach. LA County, population 10 million, has a population larger than 42 states.
And they all have the same number of senators, and they have a higher proportion of electoral votes for electing the president than larger states do.
Yeah, using the math, their vote, comparatively is worth a lot more than our votes, because just the impact they have on the national elections.
Yeah, and you would think that even the Republicans in the red states that are not one of these 7 states, only one of the states is a Democratic state of the. Well, no, that's not true. Even the Republicans in the red states would you think they would feel slighted and left out, and not getting the candidates coming to your state. But it must be amazing being in those 7 states. Your television show stations commercials must be one political ad after another, because that's where they've put most of their advertising money is on television. And so there must be an enormous. I'm here in California. I don't remember seeing a single ad for either Trump or Harris on the television, not one. But I imagine if you're in
all ads.
You see, yeah, I haven't seen any, but I imagine if you were in Michigan or Wisconsin or Georgia, something like that, you must be seeing a ton of ads for them, not to mention how much mail must be coming into your boxes and how much email you must be getting and people knocking on your door and the whole bit, that you matter and other people don't.
And that's a problem too, because candidates for both parties, they seek, the large states that are not swing states, they come down for money. So they don't need to earn our votes. They'll come down to do a fundraiser, collect a big bag of money, and they move on. And they kind of take us for granted, unfortunately. And they concentrate on those swing states because those are the ones that they're going to flip the election. So as you said, there's only about 7 states that are really key to electing the presidency.
Well, it's interesting. Trump did come to California last weekend. He was here on Saturday in Coachella. On some ranch over there, some big supporter, and they were saying he was here because he wanted to raise money, and it was interesting in that I was signed up to go, but I never went. But as I understand it, you drove in, you parked your car at one of these places, and then these buses took you to the rally. Well, the problem happened is after the rally was over, the buses weren't there to take people back.
I've not verified it, but I was reading about that earlier today, and apparently there was something like 14 buses that took Trump supporters to the rally, but then coming back, apparently the supporters, according to the article I read, the supporters were getting agitated and angry about being able to leave. They punched one bus driver in the back of the head. A woman spit on another bus driver who was a Trump supporter. And so the bus company pulled out and it said it's too dangerous for us to operate these buses. And so thousands of people got stranded because some supporters were attacking the bus drivers.
I wonder how they got back to their cars. I mean, they could walk, but it'd be probably 4 or 5 miles, I would think, at least. And it was 100-degree heat, so it's kind of, well, anyway, whatever. That's the price you pay for being a Trump supporter. Anyway, hey, listen, we're going to get on to some topics here. And if you have any questions or any comments you'd like to make, please give us a call at 888-909-1050. That's 888-909-1050. Write it down. So if we say something you want to comment on or question about, just give us a call in there. Now, speaking about Trump, I've been reading more and more about how erratic his behavior became. Apparently, his last rally he had, something went wrong in the last half hour. They were spent listening to music as he just sat on the stage. Unbelievable. So let's see, what does it say here? It says here, I'm going to say here, wait a minute. With 3 weeks left, Trump's running an unorthodox campaign with insults and mix of people. Donald Trump went online after midnight to brag about acing cognitive exams he never released, and his cholesterol, immediately calling Vice President Harris's allergies a dangerous situation. By midday, he was meandering through an interview in which he would not directly say whether he would allow a peaceful transfer of power after the election, and later complained about Fox News having Harris on the air. So he's all upset with Fox News now because they did an interview with Harris. He spent the previous evening. So it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And he really seems to be losing, but people don't seem to care. And he just recently made, and Harris made a big point of it in her campaign speech just the other day about him calling the most dangerous thing is the enemy within the United States. It's not the enemies out. It's not Iran and so forth and so on. It's the enemies within the United States. In other words, the people who are not supporting him. And he's made no bone about the fact that he is going to turn the National Guard and the military on protesters and people he doesn't like. It's a very, very scary situation because he'll do it.
Yeah, it's also interesting too that I think when Donald Trump is talking about things like the deep state, conspiracies, there's people against him in the government. It's not just right-wing supporters that believe that and it appeals to. There's also elements on the left wing that also buy into these conspiracies. So when he's talking about a conspiracy against him. They let the assassins come out to get me. They're working against us. It's also appealing to people on both sides of the spectrum, basically, who believe in those fringe conspiracies.
I have read some, not much, but I've read that there is a number of Bernie supporters that have become Trump supporters, possibly because of these conspiracies. You know anything about, since you're such a strong Bernie, but you know anything about that?
No. I will say, generally speaking, based on my Bernie fellow Berners, I know, Bernocrats, in 2016, there was a split. There was some people who said, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. There was some who said, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein as a protest vote. There was some who said, I'm not going to vote at all. In 2020, there was no split. It was, we're going to hold our nose and vote for Joe Biden. And same thing as in 2024, it seems to be we're going to hold our nose and vote for Kamala Harris. I have not really seen a few. There's been a few who said we're going to vote for Jill Stein because of the, situation going on with the Palestinians and other issues. But for the most part, I would say, all the progressives I know, the Bernicrats, they're saying, okay, we don't agree with Biden or Harris, but we're going to hold our nose because Donald Trump is such an existential threat to democracy, our system of alliances, that we're going to defeat Trump no matter, support any Democrat, basically. So no, I've not seen on my circles I run any support for Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, and yet, let's talk a bit about Harris. Is really, she's always been very progressive. Maybe not as progressive as we would like in some instances, and she's having to hew a bit to the middle, the moderate side, but she's certainly more progressive, let's say, than Biden.
There's actually, I don't know who's advising the Harris campaign, but I will tell you, as someone who is politically active, I kind of question about some of the campaign messaging I've been seeing recently. So mentioned earlier in the beginning of the show about I've seen a few campaign ads, and those campaign ads were talking about Kamala's got support from secretaries of state, CIA directors from Republican and Democratic administrations, and I've been getting emails saying, Kamala's supported by Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney, and as a Democratic voter, as a progressive voter, those, touting these endorsements from Republicans is not going to, have me go out and volunteer for Kamala Harris. That messaging, it could be important for a red state, for swing districts. I could see that if they were targeting conservative areas of a swing state, maybe in Pennsylvania, maybe in Virginia, I could see that. But as a Democratic voter, I'm getting all kinds of different emails and calls and texts. And when I see those types of endorsements, it's not enduring me to vote, for the Democratic candidate, saying all these Republicans are supporting the Democrat. So yeah. It's just one thing I question about why the targeting of the message, basically.
Well, I think it's because they're trying to reach those middle of the road voters or those independent voters, saying, hey, look, these are Republicans voting for Harris, so it's not out of line if you vote for Harris. I also think that one of the big issues that's driving this is of course the reproductive rights, the abortion issue, and so there's probably some women who are somewhat more conservative, but they are all upset. They're certainly concerned about the abortion issue, and they will feel better voting for Harris because look at these military people and Republican officials and stuff who are also voting for Harris. Makes it seem like, yes, this is the right thing to do, and makes it more likely that they will vote for Harris.
Yeah, that's an important issue, and it's one of many in this election. It's also interesting too is the polling I've been seeing is voters. I think the top three issues to voters is reproductive rights, the economy, and immigration.
Yeah, that's right, and things that the economy is doing better now. I mean, inflation is way down, gas prices are down. But the message doesn't seem to be getting out to people. I guess they expected prices to go down um, rather than just kind of flatten out. But everything I've read about Trump and his tariffs and this kind of stuff is everything says that if Trump becomes office and puts in these tariffs and stuff, inflation's going to go through the roof.
When it comes to inflation, I think it was kind of lost on the everyday voter or the everyday consumer, because even if inflation does go down, it's still very high compared to what it was 4 years ago, 8 years ago. And that you could look at things, statistically, mathematically, but when people go out shopping, when they go to the grocery store, when they get their rent bill, it's like what you're telling me may be the truth. But when I look at my bank account at the end of the month and there's nothing in there and I'm working two jobs, people, people are struggling and people are angry. And when people feel that way, they tend to vote against the incumbent.
Yeah. And yet the immigration thing is, if we don't have immigrants coming into this country, and if we deport all the people who are here, which is one of the things to do, we're going to have a tremendous shortage of workers, especially in the essential industries, food production, food distribution, and this kind of stuff. And prices are just going to go through the roof.
Yeah, and the immigration is also interesting too, because I remember when Donald Trump was first elected, and I don't know if it was a political article or maybe it was a political article, but it was talking about how Donald Trump really didn't understand the issue. He thought that border judges on the border, were handling cases and expelling immigrants or refugees, and so he moved all these judges from courts in the Northeast and the Northwest down to the border, and they were saying, we had cases to deal with, and then we're moved to the border where we actually have no business doing here. We were expelling more immigrants when we had our offices, in our regular courtrooms, but because Donald Trump thought they needed to be on the border, less immigrants got expelled or removed or sent back to their home countries, because Donald Trump doesn't understand how immigration actually works. And one other aspect too is a lot of immigrants are not. I mean, yes, there are a lot of immigrants coming over the border, but there's also people who are overstaying their visas.
Yeah.
And that's something that people don't see, like on the news. So, yes, you can sneak over the border, but you could also come over on a visa saying you're a student, you're a worker, and just overstay your visa, and you don't have to worry about coyotes or anything like that. You just come over legally and just you stay illegally.
Yeah. Well, now, one of the things that's coming down in this election, they say that's going to make a difference, or is going to decide the election, is young people, if they actually come out and vote, and of course vote for Harris. What you qualify as a young person? How do you see the youth vote in this country, and how is it going to affect the presidential election?
Honestly, the circles I run in are not the young people. um, I'm probably younger than the average voter, but I'm not in like college anymore. So I will say, based on statistics, what I've seen, a couple different things I want to talk about. One is I seen a poll where it said Trump is actually gaining young Latino voters, and I think part of that is because Trump has the appearance, of the strong man, and he's appealing to people. It's interesting because I live in a city of Carson. It's near uh, different immigrant communities, like Wilmington. Has a large number of Latino immigrants, and Long Beach has different immigrants from, let's say, Cambodia, for example. And so one interesting aspect, and this is kind of consistent throughout American history, is there's a mentality among immigrants of "I got mine, screw you," right?
Mm-hmm.
People who are third generation, second generation, even first generation immigrants that say, I don't want, I'm an immigrant, but I don't want those immigrants coming over because they're going to make me lose my job. They're going to lower my wages. And so when Trump is using these scare tactics, telling people, you got immigration's out of control. You got to vote for me. I'll keep those people out. He he's appealing to the like to the dictators he likes so much, the strong men in Russia and North Korea, and that is appealing to young male voters.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I was listening to a show on Sirius. It's a progressive channel, and they had this person on. One of the was talking about how young black males too are have. I mean, it's not like most of them are, but there's a more are going to seem to be voting for Trump. And he was saying he was interviewing someone, and they said the reason that they did, a lot of them are, is because Trump pardoned a couple rappers. And that kind of sent a signal to them that Trump is kind of, on their side. I don't know. Obama, made his appeal to black men, and I thought it was very, very good. But I'm just wondering if even if Barack Obama, who is this tremendous orator, was able to pull some of these black males to vote for Harris. He was talking about how, misogyny and fear of having a woman president and so forth and so on. But it's a concern, and I know the Democrats now are really trying the best to reach out to stop this slight hemorrhaging. The problem is, even though all the polls show most black males and most Hispanic males are going to vote for Harris, it's lower apparently than what voted for Biden. And since this election is going to be so close, that little bit of difference could make the difference.
Right. Trump doesn't need to win Latino voters or black male voters. He just needs to get just enough of them to win. Right. And that number may be as low as a third.
Or even less, actually, when you're talking, percentages of 1% and 2% who wins the election. Let's talk about something that really apparently is important to young people, and that is the Israel-Gaza Palestinian imbroglio that's going on right now. A lot of people are really torn on this. I mean, what happened on October 7th when Hamas came into Israel and slaughtered 1,200 people and took several hundred hostage and been holding them as hostages was outrageous and just horrid. And I don't know if Hamas was expecting the response that they got, but Israel's response has been just, kind of totally out of proportion. It kind of reminded me of what happened in the United States on 9/11. We had 3,000 people killed when those planes flew into the buildings. But the response that the United States did with the war on terror caused more problems than it solved. It was the wrong response. We've spent over $1 trillion on the war on terror. I've read that over 1 million people have died because of the United States war on terror. So what we did only made things worse. With the Iraq War, we empowered ISIS, and we empowered all these fundamentalist radicals. And I'm just wondering, with Israel going into Gaza and just slaughtering 40,000 people, as I understand it, mostly women and children, is totally. It's the wrong response. It's just going to make things worse, and it's not going to make things better. And they just seem to feel that bombing is the only way to solve this problem. And I think they're wrong.
And it's not just the bombing, too. It's also the, thousands who are going to die of malnutrition, disease, people who are going to be permanent refugees because there's no infrastructure left.
Yeah.
Everything has been leveled. I know Hamas, uses, civilian infrastructure to hide in, but pretty much everything has been destroyed. From hospitals to schools. And I've seen a poll a few days ago that said among Muslim voters in Michigan, something like 40% were going to vote for Jill Stein.
Jill Stein, yeah. Yeah, and that could certainly influence the election tremendously. Because I always like to talk about the fact that maybe we can blame all these problems on Ralph Nader, because back in 2000, when Gore was running against Bush, um, Gore lost by what? I mean, Bush lost by. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, Gore lost by like 500 votes in
Like
Florida.
537.
Right, and Ralph Nader got 90,000 votes. Most of those people would not have voted for Bush; they would have voted for Gore, and this, everything would be totally different. If I doubt if Gore had been elected president and 9/11 happened, I don't think he would have handled it the same way Bush did. I certainly wouldn't have gone to Iraq.
Yeah, I think based on 9/11, the war in Afghanistan was inevitable, but certainly not Iraq.
Yeah,
And there was several times where we could have not gone that path, but Bush led us down that path.
well, what led us down the path was because Iraq has the second largest oil reserve in the world. If Iraq was the carrot capital of the world, we never would have gone into Iraq. And we wanted the oil. And what a disaster we have caused by going into Iraq. I mean, Hussein was, a horrible person, a horrible leader. But once again, the way we tried to solve these problems was absolutely the wrong way to do it. The military doesn't solve problems usually. The military makes things worse. And certainly, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of young people especially, are all upset by what's happening. Although Harris has certainly been calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, and I guess now in Lebanon as well. Um, it seems like this country is just totally powerless to convince Israel to stop and engage in a ceasefire.
And just to add to that too, I think progressives have seen when AIPAC gets involved in certain congressional elections. I've seen that with Representative Bowman and I forget her name in Missouri. She lost
Yeah,
she lost her
I know
primary.
you're talking about. Yeah,
AIPAC pours in millions of dollars to defeat candidates who don't agree with them, and we'll see that those Democrats are defeated in the primary, and the AIPAC supported candidate, which is very pro-Israel, gets elected. So in Congress is very much pro-Israel, but the few dissenting voices are snuffed out.
yeah.
And that problem is, also dealing with campaign finance reform, and big money interests get involved in races. They pour in millions of dollars, and they don't have to win the general election. They just got to get enough votes in the primary
Right.
to defeat a sitting member of Congress.
Yeah, once again, this is all the Citizens United decision. We have, that's one of the, and that was before Trump's appointees were in there on the Supreme Court, and it's just been a disaster. With now that money is the same as speech, it's just an unbelievable decision. One that I don't know if they'll ever get overturned, but it's turned our elections into an absolute farce. Where the candidate gets the most money, spends the most money, is the one that usually wins the election. That's not the way things are supposed to be. I'm a big favor of government-funded elections. There should be no private money in it. Every candidate gets a certain amount of money, and how many people they can motivate to get out there and work for the candidate, not how much money they can raise by ads on television. And so forth and so on. Anyway, speaking about wars, though, what's the progressive take on the Ukraine war?
Unfortunately, I think there are a few in those circles that are not necessarily pro-Russian, but they're, they see kind of an equivalency of like the military-industrial complex, and we should oppose it because, we're going to be sending, helping the military-industrial complex, and, we shouldn't help Ukraine for that reason, or even some conspiracy theories about, the U.S. is propping up, a government in Ukraine, for example, that unfortunately I see that I don't believe that, but some think that U.S. is propping up the Ukraine government that's illegitimate. But for the most part, I've seen, they recognize that Ukraine is, a victim of the aggressive country, which is Russia, and Russia is not just an enemy of Ukraine, but all of its neighbors. And Russia is an autocracy; it's an oligarchy, and I think Putin, unfortunately, got away with too much. He got away with, invading Georgia, invading Chechnya, and he saw, and even Crimea. He saw, I can go in there. Western states will say you shouldn't have done that. I get some sanctions, but in the end, I get the land, I get the people. Right? There's no one to stop me. And we're coming up with this important election, and I think Zelensky. I'm sorry, getting a little bit away from the main point, but I just wanted to say I think Zelensky is probably under the gun right now, and if Donald Trump wins, he knows that U.S. funding is going to dry up. And so I think he's probably looking for a victory or things to swing in his favor really in the next couple months. Because if Donald Trump wins, he's going to get cut off from U.S. funding. And he has to rely on Western Europe, which Western Europe is the support of Ukraine, but U.S. Technology, intelligence, financial aid is just so great. It's more than what Europe's contributing, just because the European states are much smaller and don't have the military industrial capacity as we do.
Right, and the thing is, and of course, Europe is also more threatened by Trump. I mean, not by Putin, by Putin than the United States is. Yeah, and if we don't, this is what they're saying. Of course, Poland and those other countries that are bordering Ukraine are really terrified that if Ukraine falls, that Putin will be coming in after them.
Yeah, and to my earlier point, if Putin got away, if things were a little bit different a couple years ago, and if Russian troops took over Kiev, if Zelensky was killed or captured, and Putin was able to install a Russian-friendly government, yeah, certainly there was nothing to stop him from going into Estonia, to Latvia, Lithuania, and annexing those countries as well.
Yeah,
or installing puppets in them, like in Belarus.
Well, so how do you feel about the United States has been preventing Ukraine from getting long-range missiles where they could go deep into Russia and bomb them. Should we be sending them the long-range missiles so they could fight more effectively?
Well, the interesting thing is, there's always been this discussion about the red line. Russia has this red line, and if Ukraine or the West crosses it, they will use nuclear weapons. But so far, red lines have been crossed. Ukraine has used American-made weapons, Western European-made weapons. Ukraine has actually invaded Russian territory, and Putin has still not used nuclear weapons. But it also works both ways. If Putin uses a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, would the West allow nuclear weapons to be used on Russia? But the scary part is, I think also Putin may not be a rational actor. And a rational actor will not use nuclear weapons because, if Putin launches a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, they're going to launch nuclear weapons in Moscow, for example. So a rational actor will say, I'm not going to cross that line. But he is, according to some reports, increasingly worried and unstable about his position in Russia. And so, he may go through the mutually assured destruction and say, let's use the nuclear weapons. Okay, maybe they'll bomb us, but maybe they won't. And that's the problem with an irrational actor like Trump is, they can do something that a normal person under normal circumstances will not do. So going back to the earlier point, Ukraine is the victim. They were invaded by Russia. There's war crimes being committed by Russians against Ukrainians. And I think, Ukrainians should be able to use, all means necessary to target. They're targeting military targets. As long as Ukraine's not targeting hospitals and schools, sure, Ukraine should be able to launch deep strikes against military targets in Russia because it's a war and Ukraine was invaded. And so Ukraine wants to end the war and have their sovereignty intact. And Putin wants to win the war, but to annex large portions of Ukraine. So they're two countries at war, and Ukraine should be able to use weapons of war against military targets.
Yeah, that's the rational response. It's horrid that all these wars are going on right now. I was listening to a commentator on the radio the other day talking about this. This is probably the most dangerous time we have been in since the Cuban Missile Crisis, with the threat of nuclear war, and back then the only people, there wasn't that many countries that had nuclear weapons. Now, there's, North Korea, and there's India, and there's Pakistan, and who knows? Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons. So many countries seem to be getting older that if one country uses them, it could trigger, who knows what it's going to trigger, but it's just bizarre. I mean, what if North Korea uses a nuclear weapon on South Korea, for example? I mean, the North Korean leader is kind of, also unhinged, and he might just do something like that. He's got the missiles to launch them. He's got the missiles to launch them to South Korea.
Yeah.
What do we do then?
Another thing I want to point out too is, for those who don't know, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there were nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
Right.
And Ukraine could have kept those nuclear weapons, and it would have been a great deterrent. But they decided to give them up, and they gave the nuclear weapons to Russia because they had more manpower, they had more, scientists that could take care of the weapons. So Ukraine voluntarily gave their nuclear weapons to Russia in exchange for an agreement that Ukraine would never be threatened or invaded by Russia.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I never heard that before. That
was back in, I think, 94, I think.
Yeah, well, that should be made a little more. Should be in the media, in the newspapers, pointing that out. That Russia had agreed to refrain, to protect, Ukraine's independence if they got those missiles. That's an interesting point. Well, listen, we're beginning to run a little low on time here, and I wanted to touch one other thing I had mentioned in the blurb I put out about. And we had touched on immigration a bit, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Haitian imbroglio, because that is that not only is that touch on immigration, of course, but it also is on racism, because I think a lot of it is because it's Haitian immigrants. A lot of it's tinged with racism as well, anti-black. I sometimes wonder if the immigrants in Springfield had come from some white country or even from Mexico, if it wouldn't be so much of a problem. I mean, accusing them of eating pets. This is just a rhetoric that's just beyond the pale. I mean, that's just appealing to the worst racist instincts that a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I believe this started with a picture of a black man holding a dead goose, and there's no context to the picture. It may have been in Springfield or a nearby community, but it was a black man holding a dead goose, and he may or may not have been Haitian. He could have just, the goose could have been killed on the road. He was just taking the goose off the road. There's no way to indicate he was going to take it home and eat it. He is a Haitian or anything like that. It's just a picture of a black man holding a dead goose. And they came up with this whole story about Haitians are going into the parks and killing all the geese, and they're going into the homes or whatever, the backyards, and eating the cats and the dogs. It's really crazy. But yeah. Again,
geese, you can buy goose in the grocery store. You can't buy Fido.
But again, Trump has this opinion on immigrants that they're probably the only good immigrant is wives who come from Eastern Europe. Immigrants are coming over, and he said before when he ran, the first time, they're they're rapists and the murderers. But now he's got this new narrative, and they're coming over and they're eating your pets. And to say that is bizarre, but I would never thought I would see it during a presidential debate. But
Yeah.
here we are, where we had a lengthy discussion about whether or not Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs, with Trump firmly in support of that idea.
And of course, he's also talking about immigration, that the immigrants are coming here and they're taking black jobs and they're taking Hispanic jobs. Like, what is this? They're not taking, like blacks do the jobs that nobody else wants. I don't understand this whole rhetoric, and people just seem to accept it.
It's, to me, it sounds like the thinking is black, stereotypically racist 19th century, those are jobs only worthy of black people or only worthy of immigrants. Janitors, bus drivers, those are the quote unquote black jobs. And that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, but it's you think it's offensive, and yet he gets away with it. There's something called what was it called? Not Trump washing. There's something where the media sort of lets Trump get away with these things that they would never let anybody else get away with, and so until recently, of course, when Biden was constantly being lambasted by the media about his age and how he was forgetful every now and then, and he stumbled and got things mixed up. Trump has been doing that all the time, and it's hardly ever mentioned until just recently. This New York Times article finally came out a week ago Sunday, talking about just how disjointed this guy is. And if you read some of his latest speeches, they're just bizarre beyond belief. They're just rambling, disconnected. And no one seems to care very much. But if Biden had been doing that, if Harris was talking like that, it'd be the lead story. It'd be the headlines. Harris makes incoherent speech.
It's two things I want to say about that. One is I do blame the media, because remember in the when Trump first ran, 2015, 2016, the media loved it. They covered his speeches, the entire speech. It was entertaining. It was funny. And the media, got good ratings. So yeah, they covered Trump, and they dismissed any idea that, that Trump would win. It was like, oh, he's just there. We don't have to take him seriously. He's just fun and entertaining. And so the media allowed Trump to rise to his position as is, because they gave him all the attention. They treated him as a serious candidate to the point where he was able to get a larger audience. The other thing I want to mention was, the earlier point was.
Earlier point?
Yeah, what was the earlier point?
That if Harris made the same incoherent statements and disjointed kind of stuff.
Okay, I was going to say, Trump had a baseline. He said a lot of funny things that weren't true, things that were offensive, but he had a baseline. But it seems that in the past few months, he's gone away from that baseline. And I think that's why we're seeing a little bit more in the media. If Trump said, something racist about Harris, as something, negative about Walz, that's covered. But that was covered the way it's been covered 4 years ago and 8 years ago. And Trump is offensive. Trump is incorrect. But the recent things where he's just kind of swaying back and forth, he's mushing all these words together, making new words. He's acting weirder than usual. I think that's why it's being picked up now. It's because he's moved from that baseline of where he was 4 years ago and 8 years ago.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's going to sink into a lot of the voters or not. Well, listen, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I just always want to cover the cannabis issues here. You sit on the board of the Brownie Mary Democrats of California, which is for those of our listeners who don't know, it's a Brownie Mary Democrats is a chartered organization of the California Democratic Party, and we work to make sure that Proposition 64 is robustly implemented, and also where Proposition 64 falls short of the ideal, we try to get laws passed to actually make it ideal. One of the interesting things, one of the few issues that Trump and Harris seem to agree on is cannabis legalization. Trump did state that he's going to vote in favor of the initiative in the Florida ballot to allow for the legalization of cannabis.
Yeah, it's real interesting to not only see the change, but also be part of the change. And I'm old enough to remember where even in California, the majority of people, shunned pot smoking. Pot smoking was for hippies and surfers, and everyone's smoking pot now. You could be a businessman, you could be a politician, and it's becoming as ubiquitous as drinking alcohol. No one bats an eye you have a beer after work, and no one's going to bat an eye if you decide to smoke a joint after work. So it's really interesting to see that.
More people smoke cannabis now than smoke tobacco.
Yeah,
which is an amazing statistic.
Yeah. So we got legal marijuana in California, which is great, but also to your listeners, it's not over yet, because even though it is legalized, there's a lot of work to be done to make marijuana more accessible, safer, and cheaper.
Yeah, so, especially the cheaper. The problem is it's taxed way too high. It needs to be taxed like beer and wine. If it was taxed like beer and wine, it would be less expensive. And also where I hear in California, and I imagine it's true in a lot of other states, the legal dispensaries are having trouble competing with all the illegal ones, because the legal ones don't pay these usurious taxes. And so the whole point of Proposition 64 was to do away with the illegal market. But because of the usurious taxes that are being imposed on the product, it's the illegal market is probably bigger than it ever was, just because there's more people using cannabis now anyway.
Right. And the illegal market, it depends. Sometimes they can get legal products and they could sell legal products illegally. But also probably the biggest problem I would think is these illegal vendors, they're using products that have not been tested. They're not regulated. And so you can get something that's bad, or you can get something that's not the right dosage, and you don't know. But when marijuana is legal, when it's sold legally and it's regulated, it's safe, the process is done correctly and it's secure.
Down, right?
If you are using marijuana, please use a legal dispensary, because a legal dispensary is paying its taxes, it's doing everything right. And the illegal dispensaries are not paying taxes, it's not regulated, and it's hurting the legal market.
Well, Joseph, I want to thank you for joining us here tonight on Lanny Sense. You've made some really good sense here on my show, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And we'll have to have, again, maybe after the election's over, to take an analysis of what went on. Hey, folks, thank you all for joining me on Lanny Sense. Join us next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Tell your friends about Lanny Sense, the show. ACA leaves the listener behind, and Lanny Sense leaves no chance of. Good night.
Night.